From Anshe Sfard Beth El Emeth Congregation, it's time to take 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of Genesis and dialogue. Dialogue in Genesis. The question is, where do we find positive dialogue in the book of Genesis? Where do people actually communicate in an ideal kind of way? Where do people actually express one idea, the other person has his own ideas, and they counter and they have a little bit of a repartee, give and take, and come to some sort of nice conclusion? Where do we find that in Genesis? Now, I approach this topic with some skepticism, and there is an annoying question behind this type of research. And that is extensive dialogue good or bad? The presumption that we're making here, and I'll explain why in a moment, is that good repartee is a good thing. However, there is an idea the rabbis champion which says that, people who just chit-chat are not at the highest level. For instance, when Yaakov is talking to the people at the well later on, he's waiting to meet his bride, they go back and forth, but nothing significant is discussed. He says, is everybody okay? They say yes. One word answers. It's not very ideal. We know that much later on in Tanakh, you have Shaul, who has a long chit-chat with various women who are trying to give him directions. And there's a very extensive discussion, but really, is it just a bunch of flirtation? Is it really just chatter, idle talk? So with that proviso, let's proceed to try to find positive dialogue in Genesis. Now, if we look at the very first human interaction, it's Adam and Chava. Adam and Chava do not really have a real conversation. As a matter of fact, one time he refers to her as it. Zot yikare isha, ki ish lukacha zot. This one was taken from a man. He doesn't even talk to her, he talks at her. The second very negative dialogue was not even a dialogue at all, and that is the discussion between Cain and Abel. Cain simply says to Hevel, he says, Vayomer Cain el Hevel achiv, and Cain said to his brother Hevel, and it doesn't say what he said. And then as they were in the field, Cain rose up and he killed Abel. So we see that there was no dialogue. When there is no dialogue, perhaps the book is suggesting, when there's no real dialogue, when people talk at people and they don't talk to people and have a real discussion, it can lead to murder. Now, that is the premise of this discussion, that no dialogue is bad. So dialogue, positive dialogue, and extensive repartee should be good. Now, where do we find such dialogue? Well, we have a lot of dialogues between rivals. If you look for more than a three-way discussion, in other words, person A says something, responded by person B, responded by person A, responded by person B. If you're looking for some sort of dialogue where it goes on a little bit beyond just one person said one thing, one said the other, you'll often find it in dialogue between rivals. Now, you could look at this in a positive or negative way. Rivals such as Abraham and the wicked king of Sodom, right? Lot with the angels, right? Lot is not the highest type. Abraham with Avimelech. Eliezer negotiating at length with Rivka's family, who includes Lavan, not the most reputable fellow. Abraham and Ephron. Are they friends or are they really not friends? That could be an example of a very positive dialogue. But in the end, it cost Abraham a pretty penny. Now, the people of the Tower of Babel, they don't have an extensive dialogue, but they are talking together. Right? Havaniv ne'lanu ir. In this week's Parshat Noach, it says, let us come and build a tower. And the rabbis point out that, in the interpersonal human level, these people were pretty good. They were working together. There was unity. Now, the purpose of the unity may have been negative, rebellion against God, Rashi, Midrash, or it could have been sort of neutral, just a technological project they're working on together. But it is sort of some sort of a coming together, but perhaps in too much of a uni-speak. I mean, a real dialogue, one person says one thing, the other should say something else. I mean, A and B shouldn't have the exact same ideas. So there's something wrong with that as well. Now, one of the first couples who speak to each other nicely, of course, is Avraham and Sarah. It was a difficult moment. She was upset at Hagar's come-uppityness about her being pregnant when Sarah had no children. And she wanted to afflict her. And he said, all right, do whatever you want. So it is a dialogue between husband and wife, who presumably have a good relationship. But in the end, the Ramban thinks it was a sin. It was a mistake. Maybe he gave in too quickly. So it's hard to say that that's the best dialogue in Genesis. There are other dialogues which are also very questionable. Yaakov and Esav happen to have a lot of repartee. Of course, a lot of us will view those dialogues as phony. Esav didn't mean what he said. Yaakov didn't mean what he said. So I don't know if we can bring that as an example of positive dialogue in the book of Genesis, but it very well may be. It's possible that actually Yaakov and Esav did share some very real and warm moments together. It's possible. Yitzchak and Avimelech, clearly confrontational. And you have conflict. Clearly you want to talk. I mean, not like Cain and Abel. You want to have a discussion. Should be a tough discussion because there are real issues to discuss. And it's good that they're having those discussions, but I wouldn't call it a totally positive dialogue. Yaakov and Rivka have a repartee, but it's a difficult moment, and we don't know if that was a sin or not, that she encouraged him to trick his father. Yaakov and Yitzchak have a repartee, but he thinks that Yaakov is Esav, so that won't qualify either. Esav and Yitzchak do have a wonderful dialogue. Now, if you take Esav to be a trickster, and that everything he does with his father is just a big trick, then it's not positive dialogue, but it could be that indeed Esav and Yitzchak are an example of positive dialogue in Genesis. It's interesting, though, that Yitzchak wouldn't give in. He wouldn't give that blessing. Now, Yaakov and the shepherds, as we mentioned, have the dialogue. Clearly very minor characters, not clear if there's anything significant about that. Yaakov and Lavan have a very testy relationship, and they do have a real dialogue, but they almost come to blows, and it's a very, very difficult situation. Now, an example of negative dialogue was lack of dialogue, almost coming to blows, almost coming to a Cain and Abel situation, was lo yachlu daber shalom. The brothers could not speak to Yosef in a peaceful way. Clearly, very difficult situation. Strangely, Yehuda and Tamar, also very awkward situation, they also do have some sort of dialogue and repartee. Maybe it was a good relationship, but very strange one. Yosef and the Saramashkim, he helps him, he tells him his dream, he interprets it, he asks him to help him. Could be one of the very positive relationships in this book, but maybe not. Maybe the Saramashkim ditched him and dumped him as soon as he left and got into better circumstances. Yosef and the brothers, during the various accusations about whether they stole the cup or they didn't steal it, they have a good dialogue, but clearly that's not the greatest relationship. The brothers and Yaakov have some dialogue. Yehuda and Yosef have a confrontation over Binyamin. Yaakov and Paro, a very meaningless discussion. I don't know what the significance of that is. And finally, Yaakov and Yosef over the discussion of the brothers and whether he should put his hands like this or like that, giving the blessing to Ephraim and Menashe, also somewhat of a dialogue. So you really are hard-pressed to find a positive dialogue. The only really healthy and positive dialogue, strangely enough, I would say, is in Parshat Vayera, the famous Akedas Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac. There we have a wonderful dialogue. What's wonderful about it? They call each other by their names. Avi, hineni b'ni. My father, here I am, my son. And then he has a question. The question is, I see the sheep, I see the fire, I see the knife. Where is the sheep? What offering are we doing? What are we doing here? It's true, Abraham gives him a cryptic answer, but it seems it was a satisfactory answer for Yitzchak. So much so, that they went and marched together. Not like the Tower of Babel, where people didn't have separate ideas. Everyone had the same language, the same speech, the same ideas. It was like a totalitarian regime. It was, one had a question, one gave an answer. They related to each other as people. They mentioned a question, and then after it was resolved, they marched together, understanding each other, having resolved this question, a very difficult question, and they walked together with a common and shared goal and purpose. This is, I believe, the ideal model of dialogue in the book of Genesis. What does this say? It says that in our relationships with others, we should relate to others as individuals. We are entitled to ask questions and try to understand the actions of the others. Even when we deal with rivals and even enemies, we can try to have a dialogue. It has to be tough, it has to be honest. Yitzchak was very open about the things that others had done to violate his principles and to violate him and his property. But it's through dialogue we can avoid the Cain and Abel type of situations, where lo yachlu dabro shalom, where like the brothers of Joseph, they just couldn't speak to him in peace. We have to try to talk and communicate with each other. And hopefully, ultimately, through the shared values we can glean from that dialogue, we can come to get along, to respect each other, and ultimately, for father and son, brothers, family, to walk forward, to march forward together, shared goals and values, after meaningful dialogue, walk forward and walk toward the ultimate redemption. Thanks for joining us here at the Anshe Sfard Beth El congregation here in Memphis, Tennessee. Join us each week for the discussion of the Parsha and the holidays. Thanks to Jason Lefkowitz, our producer. Thank you.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein. To learn more, visit ASBEE.org.